Okay, so welcome everybody, and welcome to Sabinna Rachimova. This is the first of the speaker series for our 3-day online, the 3-day in-person lab, which forms part of the bigger Design Futures Lab 2022. Yeah, so we're very excited to together with our partners Twig, Crossover Labs, and Electric South present the Digital Futures Lab. And this is a creative economy project supported by the British Council, Southern African Arts. It offers South African content creators an opportunity to develop experiential, provocative, and immersive digital narratives about sustainable fashion and design. And we hope this will help shape kinder, earth-friendlier futures. So with me today, I'm very excited to introduce Sabinna Rachimova. Sabinna, glad to have you with us.
Well, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sorry, guys. And I'm sure everybody is with us online. So welcome to those who've joined us. This is being live streamed to our Facebook page as well as Twig's Facebook page. So Sabinna Rachimova is an opinion leader for the future generation of creatives. After graduating from Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design, she worked for the leading fashion house Christian Dior and contemporary London brand Mary Katrantzou. As a child, she learned traditional Soviet handcraft from her grandmother, developing a deeply ingrained appreciation for the craft. This early influence was a key inspiration for her namesake brand. As a double immigrant born in Central Asia, raised in Europe, and now based in London, Sabinna is incredibly passionate about inclusivity and equal opportunities. And in addition to her work as an acclaimed designer, she's a public speaker, spreading the word about both fashion tech and sustainable fashion, as well as a consultant with a focus on fashion startups and education across Europe and the UK. So Sabinna, I'm going to hand over to you and we'll give you an opportunity to speak with us, and afterwards we'll take some questions and answers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the lovely intro as well. I'll be sharing my screen in order to talk you through some things that have to do with sustainability and some things that have to do with technology. As we heard in the intro, this is what the next 3 days will be about. So I'm really excited to be part of this. So sharing my screen now, and I hope that everyone can see it properly. So yes, hi, my name is Sabinna, and I'll be talking today about my journey and also about my company, kind of like trying to give you maybe a good overview of what we do at my brand differently and how we're trying to approach the topic sustainability and innovation. But before we get started, even though we had a little intro, just, again, a reminder and just maybe kind of justifying why I'm here and why I have the right to talk about these topics, a little overview. So yeah, I'm a founder, I'm a consultant, I'm a lecturer, and I started my own brand Sabinna back, when was that, 7 years ago, back in 2015. And I see that it's a playbook for the future of sustainable fashion. That's how we describe it. I'm also a consultant. My focus are startups and educational institutions. I help both sides to implement sustainable either curriculums or sustainable practices. And I also work as a lecturer at University of Arts London. My focus there is sustainable business concepts. So let's not lose any more time, because I know the more time we have for questions in the end, the better, as this is everyone's favorite part. So we always say that sustainability doesn't start with the product, and that's why we call it sustainability beyond the product. Try and kind of like give a further overview of where we can go or what we can do in terms of sustainability if we don't only start with the product. So let's see how it all started. So Sabinna, as I said, is a playbook for the future of sustainable fashion. We say that we're ethical, innovative, and we're a female-led team as well. And we are dedicated to exploring sustainability beyond the product. You can already get a little feel of the product and what we're doing. You know that people, when they hear sustainable clothes, they probably sometimes have a certain image. But for us, it's really about not compromising the aesthetic and making sure that aesthetic and ethics, they always go hand in hand. So how did it all started? And in the introduction, it was mentioned that I learned traditional handcraft from my grandmother, and that's actually how this whole thing started as well for me. So As a child, I learned how to crochet, knit, and sew, and all of these things. And I was just really amazed by the magic of turning two-dimensional things into three-dimensional outcomes. And I really wanted to work in fashion. I didn't understand that it's a whole industry. I had a very naive approach about it. But here's just kind of like a little mood board of the first bits that I created for the very first collection when I started my own brand. So it was a lot about exploring handcraft, but then also 3D printing back at the time when it was a very new thing to do, to combine this manual labor work, but also with the futuristic approach towards the future of fashion. So as you see, I was always quite excited about building the bridge between traditional stuff and also modern and futuristic approaches. So here's like a little mood board showing you the crochet flowers that became a signature of the brand, and also that was something that kind of like gave us that push to be well known in the industry, and also was a very important first step of building the next stages of the business. So let's talk a little bit about the product. I know I always keep saying that it's about sustainability beyond the product, but of course, if the product is not right, then there's no point to go beyond that, right? So we want to get the product right. We want to get the product as conscious and sustainable as possible. Of course, when you start a brand and you start from scratch, right, without any funding and only focusing on bootstrapping and your own savings, that's exactly what I've done in the beginning. And I was then fortunate to get some help in forms of grants and sponsorings, but your budgets are very tight. So at the beginning, we didn't really have the opportunity to use the best materials or to partner up with the most innovative companies offering us materials. So we worked a lot with dead stock, for example, meaning it's fabric that would usually go straight to landfill or be burned and not used at all, even though all the resources were already spent making that material. But then in the past years, the more we grew and the further we went, and obviously the more opportunities you have, the more responsibility comes with that as well. We really decided to tackle our material, I would say even issue, because with dead stock, we couldn't really trace it back to the raw material. And that's something I always wanted to. So in the past years, the product range was improved continuously, and we added innovative materials, we reduced the synthetics, and we also made sure to stay true to the ethical production and low quantities. Obviously, the ethical production is something that was always a no-brainer for me. Coming from the maker perspective, knowing how long it takes to make stuff and how difficult it is and what kind of skill it is, it was a no-brainer that everyone who makes our clothes will also be paid fairly and treated fairly. But then the material side is always a bit of a more complex one when it comes to sustainability. For us, we managed to reach a point where we now have, for example, the cardigan you see in the image, also the pajama, they're entirely plastic-free, they're vegan, and also available in a wide size range. Size range is another thing that is super important to think about when you have a conscious and sustainable brand, because obviously you want to be size inclusive, because at the moment the sustainability sphere has a big problem of being not inclusive enough in these terms. This is something we've been tackling, and kind of really happy that we were able to develop products where we exchanged plastic buttons for Corozo nuts buttons, where the usual synthetic threads were changed to lyocell threads. And in general, we always opted for the best option that's currently available on the market, like the tencel material for the pajamas. So like a little overview in terms of product and what we developed. And as you can see, this is nothing that happens overnight, but it's always good to stay up to date on what is happening. There's no brand and no person out there that already knows everything, because this is also something that keeps developing and evolving and changing. So that's why it's so important to stay up to date with these things and always continuing to research. We have three core pillars at Sabinna. So one is consciousness, another one is storytelling, and the third one is innovation. And I've mentioned all of them throughout the presentation already. So with consciousness, as I said, we're focusing on small-scale production. The products are made using carefully selected materials, and we ethically produce in the UK, where I'm based, in Portugal, and in Austria. And Austria is where I grew up. So for me, it started with the communities that I'm close to, and then Portugal was added further down the line because they have really, really good sustainable factories that we were able to partner up with. The storytelling aspect is another pillar. Why is storytelling so important? Because obviously when we buy and we shop for fashion, one of the reasons is that we like the product, but another one is because we buy into the story behind the product, into the brand. So the psychological aspect and the way it makes you feel is also a very important one. So that's why for us, it's important to tell the stories behind the scenes as well. I'm an immigrant woman. I moved, from country to country as a child with my parents. We had to move a lot, but also as a grown-up. And I'm really familiar to have to adapt to a new place, to have to learn the language from scratch, which is never easy, and kind of like trying to find your way. So for me, the design research and the design inspiration that I have often comes from the family stories that were passed on, and also again the combination of the handcraft that I learned in the modern aesthetic that encouraged the diversity, that helps me to encourage the diversity in our industry. It's kind of like the mix of all of these things. This is where the storytelling pillar comes in. And innovation, obviously another buzzword you might say that is being used a lot next to sustainability. So in terms of innovation, our business concept is to bridge the gap between knowledge and conscious choices through an educational approach, meaning that not only having a product we felt is not enough, because your product can be as amazing as possible, but if you don't communicate it properly, and also if the customers are not ready for that product yet and there's no demand for it, what's the point? So for us, it was about exploring workshops, doing a podcast, having a consultancy offering, and all sorts of customer engagement campaigns to bridge that gap and giving people an educational approach towards understanding sustainable fashion. I'll talk about that a little bit in more detail further down the line. So if you go on our website, you will come across a section called sustainability, where you can check out what we do and what we're trying to do. And here again, I really like to put emphasis on saying that no one is like 100% sustainable in fashion, because fashion cannot be 100% sustainable. We're creating items that are actually not necessarily needed, right? Because we all have enough clothes on the planet and we could survive with that. But still, there are still really bad products out there, and we could replace them with better products, and we could replace the practices that are currently happening in the industry with better practices. So this is what we're trying to communicate with people. For us, it's about being transparent. It's about saying that, look, we have these values and this is what we're trying to do. We don't have all of it sorted out yet. For example, our size range was a big problem in my opinion. I feel we are still not size inclusive, but we're on a good journey to become size inclusive. So we're also addressing that, saying that this is something we're planning. And again, let's not forget, it's a big difference depending if you're like a smaller brand, a medium brand, or a larger brand, but we're trying to do the maximum what we can in terms of our size and the range that we offer, but being really transparent. You don't have to pretend like you have everything sorted out, but definitely communicate and say what you're working on currently and what you have figured out already. From the feedback we get from our customers, it's always really appreciated to have this transparency in communication. We also make sure that the sustainability beyond the product aspect also goes beyond and takes things in consideration, like the packaging, how we send it, how we wrap it, what the material is. So we have compostable mailers we're using, recycled mailers we're using, and also certified and soy-based ink printed tissue paper that we're using. So it's like different things that we try to communicate through our social media and websites for people to understand the sustainability approach in a better way. Another thing that is quite important is obviously the transparency of where things are made. Again, if you as a brand have nothing to hide, then just show it. And for us, it's again, one of these things where we want to bring the customer closer behind the scenes and closer to the makers to create like a perfect, triangle of the customer, us as a brand, but also all the suppliers and manufacturers behind it, because without them, there wouldn't be a product at all. So we have a studio in Hackney Wick, and we manufacturing area there in the corner that we have is there to produce some of the accessories. We work on upcycling projects there. We take care of garment repairs for Sabinna items. So you can visit us in our Hackney Wick studio in East London. And, you are able to shop there, to meet the team. It's like an all-in-one transparent space to align with everything else that we do within the company. Our machine knitted pieces are currently made in Barcelos in Portugal. And then we also have a factory in Stratford Workshops, which is just 10 minutes away from our actual studio, where we do small scale productions and small runs, but also some sampling. There are 2 more units that came, they were added additionally at the end of last year and will make their way on our website soon. So this is like under construction at the moment, but this is what we're planning. We're planning to always add and show where we're doing things and just being transparent. So when people want to know this information, it's available to them. Again, another great way to communicate sustainability and especially ethical production, just giving this transparency to people. As mentioned before, we have lots of additional services that we offer. So free repairing services and garment upcycling is one of these things. I felt like it's important to also diversify the revenue streams, first of all, because as I said, for us, keeping low quantities in terms of production is important. I'm not planning to scale and at some point reach the amount of mass production that we can't handle and also don't really support in the terms of sustainability. So for me, it was important to see what else can we do with the existing items in the wardrobes, and how can we tackle the issues there. The free repairing service applies to all the stuff that you bought with us. So any Sabinna item you bought in the past 7 years, you can get free repair for that, because out of sight, out of mind doesn't work in our industry, or shouldn't work in our industry, especially not if you're focusing on sustainable practices. So, and the garment upcycling thing is a partnership we're doing with a company called Couture. So you can book directly with them an upcycling service. You see the imagery here, what we've done to your wedding dress, shortening it, embroidering it, and then the leftover fabric, it was dyed, and we crocheted a bag out of the leftover pieces. Unfortunately, it's not in the slide here, but if you go on our Instagram, you can check out the reel of the whole process behind it. Again, another way of contributing to, sharing economy, circular economy, and just being part of it, and not only creating new products. And that was kind of the key for us, and also important. It's important to mention all this didn't happen the first day or the first night when I started the business. This has all been a development within the past 7 years. Speaking of sharing economy, quite often brands that produce new products like us, they're a bit scared of the new developments, looking at rental companies popping up, upcycling companies, lots of these, or repairing services. They feel like, oh my God, people are not going to buy new anymore. But I strongly disagree. I think that even as a brand that makes new products, we need to participate in the sharing economy as well. So this is what we've been doing for 2 years now. And our strongest collaboration is with the German company Untitled. You can rent our pieces. So you can see you're actually saving money, and also you can rotate your wardrobe more often, trying out new pieces, trying out new styles, finding out if something suits you better. Plus, for us as a company, it's an additional revenue stream and a way to really get the most out of the pieces that we have. So we can allocate a couple of pieces for rental, a couple to sell to the customer directly. And with Unowned, customers can actually purchase the pieces if they really like them and want to keep them as well. So I think it's a very smart service. And the more often it was rented out before, the cheaper the price for you is to actually get the final product. Very good approach, and I find it's a very exciting collaboration. And again, you can participate in sharing economy by not necessarily having the solution yourself as a brand and a company, but by collaborating and partnering up with someone who knows exactly what they're doing. So this is what we do in terms of participating in the sharing economy. Another very important aspect is the communication when it comes to the educational approach. But in the very beginning, I start these presentations and I say educational approach, people are sometimes confused what it means. But for us, it's basically how can we take the customer on board with us and also take their fear and their questions and all of that, and giving them more clarity of why we see that a product is sustainable, or why we see that our practices are ethical, or what conscious consumption can mean. So for us, again, it was adding these different areas to the business and our collaboration with Compare Ethics. And I guess you already saw throughout the whole presentation, collaboration is key for us. We are not experts in everything, but we don't have to be, because there are incredible people out there. And by collaborating with them together and partnering up, we can really achieve amazing things together. So the collaboration with Compare Ethics, which is a UK-based company helping validate sustainable claims, was a game changer for us. We've been working with them for a while, and they are a company that really wants to see all of the proof. So the claims we make, like saying it's ethically produced in this factory, we use only organic cotton, it's got certified cotton, there's no plastic in this item, we use certain type of packaging. They want to see the paperwork for it. They want to see all the invoices. They want to see all the contracts we have, everything basically that would prove that this is where the item was made. They then validate that, and then you get this widgets for your website saying that the impact is verified by Compare Ethics. So you can see that in the screenshot of the marble cardigan from our product page, saying that we had a save of 1.4 kilometer of driving emissions. It's suitable for vegans and uses 0% plastic in product, because they validate validated as. And this is super important for us because there's so much greenwashing happening in the sustainability space at the moment that this helps us to stand out with actual verified impact proof, which is then, you know, only possible for us because of the collaboration with Compare Ethics. And we have a monthly podcast covering fashion topics. And this is more of a B2B podcast, I would say. So it's for a niche group that really wants to find out more, because we're talking a lot how customers are confused about sustainability in the fashion industry. But I have to say, we as the industry ourselves are often not even sure what is happening, especially when it comes to certain topics that became such a trend subject in the past years. We didn't really catch up on all the information and the proper definition. And this is why also greenwashing is possible in the first place. So Consciousness Beyond the Product is a monthly podcast for like the critical consumer and professional working in the industry. You can listen to it on Spotify and an Apple podcast as well. And we tackle all sorts of topics and inviting experts for every topic to come on board and chat with us and share their expertise. So we had topics like small scale production, we had topics like cultural appropriation, kids wear and sustainability, material innovation, post-COVID tools that change the fashion industry. So you see a lot of things that are somehow tied to the topic of sustainability, but also need to be explored further for us to start to understand it in a better way. So then we have the how-to workshops. I mentioned a couple of times that we're also offering workshops. So what is that about? That was obviously more popular before the pandemic. That changed, unfortunately, a little bit, but I hope we can go back to that very soon. And we are hosting in our beautiful studio in East London, in the UK. We have a space where we can host workshops to teach people certain skills. It's from things like how to sew on a button or fix a hole, to painting a jumper that you might not like anymore and want to upcycle, to creating your own beaded jewelry, or maybe learning how to create crochet or hand knit. All of that, we've done all sorts of workshops, because this is obviously a couple of things that has been then covered. First of all, you can learn a new skill, and it's always fantastic. Handcraft has always been a therapeutic thing for me as well. I think it calms your nerves, it just makes you feel so much better. So again, just, you know, an additional add-on to that, but also it teaches you the value of things and how long it takes to make a garment, or how long it takes to make certain things. Again, this is a fantastic way of also explaining to people why sustainable fashion will never ever be able to cost as much as fast, or as little actually, as fast fashion costs. Again, you know, it's an approach to extend further, to add a revenue stream to the business, but also understanding of how we can communicate to people what is happening. In general, we're trying to approach the triple bottom line of having planet, people, and profit balanced out in the business. Another exciting project that we have done is the Project Earth with SELFRIDGES, and that was last year. Yeah, that was 2021, where together with a couple of other amazing sustainable designers and the company Richure, which is focusing on upcycling, we got to take over their space and their windows, showcasing our sustainable products, but also we had a machine in there for people to come in and book upcycling appointments, and just for us to be there and spread the awareness, because Oxford Street is one of the busiest, if not the busiest shopping street in Europe, actually. So it was like a big thing, and Selfridges is a very well-known and prestigious store in London. So to be part of that and being exposed to such a wide audience finally also made us realize how sustainability is not a niche anymore. So it's fantastic to see all of that. So that's been a really interesting and nice project to really go outside of that bubble, because it's a very different thing communicating sustainability to those who already know about it and are participating in that. But it's a completely different thing then to be placed with alongside loads of high street brands and luxury brands, and then still being able to communicate your own agenda and your own mission. That was very exciting. Another campaign that we've done recently and that I personally love a lot, and I love to share in the presentations as well, again, an example of how you can bring more transparency into your business, is our price transparency campaign called How Much Did You Save? There's always this discussion of how sustainable fashion is too expensive, and in some cases it is very true, but also we can't expect it to cost what fast fashion does. So with this campaign, we started to approach it in a way where we share certain items that, you know, are our best sellers, and then we make a breakdown of how much we're actually investing into what area, how much labor and material is, reminding people that there's a thing like tax and VAT, the fulfillment is not for free, that you have payment fees, because if you pay by card, I'm giving this provider some money. If you pay by PayPal, I'm giving PayPal some money. And then you have the running costs. The running costs would include expenses for the studio space, for the employees, for the marketing you have, and also the profit margin. And that actually showed people how small the profit margin then is of sustainable clothes. That campaign has been really popular. We launched that actually on Instagram. So it was an Instagram exclusive. And it got us the Draper Sustainability Fashion Award nomination for this year, which we're really excited about, because obviously it's such an amazing think that can happen for you if you work in the fashion industry, because it's so prestigious and so well known, and any brand from like tiny to massive is part of that award. And for us, it was really the whole process, again, of us exchanging the knowledge with our customers, with all of our stakeholders. We started off with asking people over Instagram, how much would you charge for it? And you see, for the same product, people had answers between 20 pounds or euros to 135, which is obviously insane. So it showed us how people reacted to it. There was so much interaction. It just shows us how important it is to have this additional layer to just having a sustainable product. But this educational content aspect is really crucial, and that's why we're building so much on it. And then, of course, let's not forget the innovation part. I mentioned a couple of times, innovation can mean so many things. You can argue that it's innovative in itself, having a business concept as we do with so many revenue streams and focusing on so many different things, and also trying to tackle the issue of not overproducing and offering products that are synthetic free. But for us, it's also about dipping into the future and seeing what else is out there. So the virtual world, the metaverse, and all of that is incredibly exciting for us. We want to collaborate and exchange knowledge. By working together with other people, obviously it helps us to learn from each other, but we also want to improve customer experiences, right? And experiences have to be made in a way that you want to remember them. So we've done two really cool projects in the past. So one was 2016, where we did a mixed reality shopping experience, and you can see the two pictures at the bottom. The people came in into the showcase, and they put on a HoloLens, and an avatar would appear, and by swiping with their hand, they could change the outfit and the looks of the avatar that was wearing the new collection that we created. And then if they really liked something, they could log it in and buy it instantly in shop, because the clothes were available on the same day, which is like obviously super cool. And imagine it's 2016. The avatar was at a very different stage than what we know now in these days with avatars. And now, you know, things like HoloLens and the metaverse and the virtual world, it improved so much. Like the quality is incredible. But this has been an amazing case study that also got us an award back then, because this was just kind of tapping into the future of how could you showcase in the future, how could you sell in the future, and how could you communicate certain things about your collection to the customer, maybe even ideally sitting at their comfort, the comfort of their own home, and having a HoloLens themselves, or you know, having a virtual headset themselves. I keep saying HoloLens because it's what we used, the HoloLens by Microsoft, but obviously it can be any headset that you can use in order to enter the metaverse in the virtual world. And another project we have done is actually the upper image that you see. So I will switch to the next slide because it describes it a bit more. So it's called The Fabric of Reality, and that was in collaboration with the Fashion Innovation Agency and Riot. And there were 3 designers that were brought on board. It was Damara, Charlie Cohen, and me, so us as a brand. And it was an immersive virtual fashion show experience that combines storytelling with story living. There was quite a very exciting time to do that, right? So in 2016, it was pure of like experimenting around, seeing what people will think about the approach of seeing clothes on an avatar in a virtual world. But now we were really facing other issues, because this was 2021. So meaning we've been a year into the pandemic, we understood that things have to be approached in a different way. We had travel restrictions. You couldn't just go and do showrooms. A lot of companies couldn't just do catwalk. Fashion weeks couldn't take place as they used to. So lots of things to think about. So this collaboration was that every designer was paired with a leading VR artist, and it was about creating a world, a virtual world, that would reflect the research and the thoughts that you have as a creative and as a designer. And by putting on the headset, you will be then able to enter through a portal into that world that each designer created and designed alongside that VR artist. And basically the viewers will be able then to virtually interact with the garments, with the story world. In my particular case, I decided to take my grandmother's embroideries from over 30 years ago that she has done and put them into the virtual world. So basically you entered her embroideries, and within that you could see the thought process behind it. You could hear sounds that I recorded and my mom recorded of like childhood stories and children's songs in Tatar and in Russian. So it was like really nice to be able to bring the whole story behind it of why you design certain things. And it was displayed at the Museum of Other Realities. So you could actually visit that for a year, the whole exhibition. And there was also a 2-dimensional, a 2D approach form of a video. So since we're tight on time here, I'm not going to be able to show you the full video of that. But if you have a look and search on the internet for the fabric of reality, you will find everything in detail and you can explore this project further. But this is again an amazing case study, an amazing way to see how you can dive into the mind of a creative and how you can create an extra layer to just showing the product, right? So showing the product is one thing, but how can you show everything that happens behind it? How can you really put emphasis on the behind the scenes and the making process? You know, these opportunities are endless with solutions like that and with technology like that. And also, again, having said that, 5 years between the first project that I've done in Fashtech and the second one, which is this one, it's just amazing to see how much the technology improved. Nowadays, you can buy headsets for home use, right? You're like with 250 pounds, you're in, you can buy them and you can play games online. You can go into the metaverse, you know, Facebook and Zuckerberg, they talk about it a lot. It changed so much. So the opportunities are just like becoming more accessible, and also the spectrum of the opportunities is just becoming wider. It's a very exciting thing to see. So I'm really looking forward to see what's coming next. So as you see, conscious and future-oriented fashion companies, they offer more than just products. They actually offer experiences, and they invite us to be part of their story and also their journey. And, you know, I think this is kind of like the best way to summarize, oh, this is what we're trying to do as a conscious and future-oriented fashion company. We want to be relevant today in the modern world, but we also want to make sure that we think ahead of what's happening next. What will be the demand? What is it that people need? How can we tackle the big issues that we are facing in the fashion industry? Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Here you can have some of the opportunities and options to contact me and get in touch with me. My name is Sabinna Rachimova. It was a real pleasure. You have the website of the company, then you have the brand Instagram and my personal Instagram. And since I'm also doing consultancy, you have also the page for that. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to taking hopefully lots of your questions.
Thank you, Sabinna. We really appreciate it. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just a note to say that I think that the video that you had said we could Google and watch is actually geo-blocked, so we can't actually access it here. So it'd be great. I mean, maybe, I don't know if you have it readily available. I mean, it would be amazing to be able to show it during our time together now.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to do that because I don't have it on my laptop or download. Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. Sorry. Yeah. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just, if anybody has any questions, are there any questions? Yes.
Hi, Sabinna. Thank you so much for your really lovely work that you are doing at Sabinna. I'm interested in how to measure your impact as a company. Do you measure it through the number of people that attend, or do you see that the educational work that you're doing does eventually influence how brands go about approaching sustainability?
So I don't know if you heard that, Sabinna. Sorry.
Half of it. Okay. If you could repeat. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you'd want to come up here just to just quickly ask your question again, but it was how you measure your impact. So I know you're doing a lot around education, but how do you measure that impact?
That's a fantastic question. So there are lots of ways to measure that, and obviously lots of tools that are coming in. So far, we didn't find the right partner, because ideally we would like to measure our impact properly in terms of carbon footprint and all of these things. But one of the ways is working directly with an agency in Portugal, which helps us to measure the impact in terms of raw material. They're the ones who we are like working with to find the right manufacturing partners and so on, and just understanding of how much, like less of an impact we're having by choosing a certain material over another material. And then compare ethics, as I mentioned, is another way, because with them, since I'm providing all of the stuff in terms of how many pieces we're making, what material it is, where it's made, what the journey is that this item made, they are then also able to measure some of it for us, showing us how much we saved or how much we improved compared to a more conventional choice of fabric or, you know, production unit. But obviously in the future, we are really keen to find a partner who could have a more 360 approach. So we don't have it happening in the different areas of the business, but could actually have someone measuring the whole impact across of how we operate in the studio, how we create our products, and all the other things we do as well. And obviously our digital carbon footprint as well.
Thank you. So any other questions from the floor? Yeah? No? Okay. Yes, yes. Do you want to come over here? Because it'll be much easier, I think. We have another question. Do you want to come back?
Of course.
Yeah. Let's take a seat. Hi, Sabina.
My name is Tandile. I just wanted to find out, like, with all of the greenwashing that's happening right now, like, I find it very difficult to, or like a little bit challenging to get to like the true essence of like sustainability and like how you can actually distinguish between like a brand that is truly sustainable and ethical. Do you have like any sort of like guidelines? I know you shared throughout the presentation, I've taken notes, but like, do you have any like additional guidelines on like how to discern and like how you got to being able to define it for your particular brand?
Fantastic question. One of my favorites, because it is really difficult to actually tackle greenwashing just from like, you know, a consumer perspective. As you say, it's so many things to consider, and you're already trying to read every label and understand the framework. Well, first of all, we need obviously the politics to jump on board, and we need better regulations in all of the countries, because if the regulations improve, then greenwashing will be made harder as well. And then the especially bigger players in the corporates who are tapping into greenwashing and who are doing it on purpose because this is their way of solving their sustainability issues, it's just through marketing, wouldn't even be able to do that because it would be illegal to greenwash, which would be like fantastic. This is something we need. But in the meantime, while the regulations are still either happening right now and being reviewed or on the way, I think it's always good to understand what the brand stands for in general. So if you have a fast fashion company that usually doesn't care about anything and has, you know, lots of new items coming out every week, produces a lot, there's no disclosure on materials or where things are made, and then they bring out one conscious collection, you can already see that this is happening for greenwashing purposes. So they have this one conscious collection in order to say, look, we're also doing something to contribute. Then there are a couple of tools that you can use. I said Compare Ethics is one example. If you go on the website of Compare Ethics, they have a list of brands that they verified. So here again, you have a third party verifying what the brand is claiming and if it's actually true or not. Then you have the app Good On You. Good On You got really big in the past years, and it's actually made for the consumer use of checking. If you want to shop with a brand, you can type it in and see if Good On You has it in their list, and then they would give them a rating between like, you know, poorly or actually okay or improving and so on. So I found that as a consumer, because let's not forget, even if you're a fashion professional, you're also a consumer yourself. So from that perspective, for me, it was quite helpful to check out the brands and see what they're doing. Then there are all sorts of certificates. You know, there's something like B Corp certification. So if you see a company that is B Corp certified, then you can argue it's more trustable, right? Because it's very hard to get that certification. But even with certificates, it's quite difficult because not all of them are legit, and not all of them are affordable for all sorts of businesses in all sizes. And I think the follow-up question that you had after that is like, what is the framework and how can you align with that framework? This is what I meant in terms of depending on how big you are and what your opportunities are. If you're just like a small brand, a one man or one woman show just starting off, right? And you have very different access to things and you have different responsibilities then as well. But if you're a corporation with all the budgets in the world and massive teams, then obviously your responsibilities are very different as well. So for me as a consumer, I have very different expectations towards someone who just started like, I don't know, a year ago and is still figuring it out and is producing anyway on such a small scale, or those who are actually big players within the fashion industry and should be doing so much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Sorry, I can't hear it.
Yeah, sorry about that. So maybe if you can speak a little bit more about your kind of collaboration with VR Human and kind of how you first came to that, how you discussed what it is you would translate into the immersive kind of world. And maybe you can unpack that, because in the room we've got sustainable designers and creative technologists, some with varying different kinds of skills. So it would be good to kind of talk a little bit more about how you came to create the work together, you know?
Yes, of course. I would love to talk you through the process. It was a very interesting one, and I won't lie, I was really nervous about it, because obviously bringing the worlds together of technology and fashion can be a tricky bit, because in fashion, I always say our industry is very stubborn, doing things like they used to for many decades. You know, it's a lot of manual work, a lot of sketches, and then I had to translate all of that to the digital world. So how do we do that? And for me, working with Vlad, with VR Human, it was a really incredible experience, because first of all, we only met digitally. So that's very important. We never met in real life because it was the pandemic, because we couldn't travel, because he was in the US at that moment. I was in London at that moment. For us, it was the only ways meeting in metaverse. So we did meet in metaverse with our headsets on. We can talk with each other through that. It was fantastic. It was already kind of like an experience in itself. And we would really discuss the visuals, because it's the hardest bit is to communicate what you want it to look like. Even if I sent him a sketch, even if I sent him the embroideries of my grandmother, telling him the story of my family and all of that, the aesthetic can still be very different, right? You could go on and then design something and do something that is not aligning with the aesthetic in my head. So I would say that from my experience, my advice would be, if you have collaborations from these two sides, definitely make sure to put emphasis on communication. There is no such thing as over communicating. You know, the more you can do and the more you can give in terms of information, the better. In our case, I provided a lot with sketches, with collages, with photographs, with the actual textured work, with some images of like actual codes in real life that we have in our collection, and I wanted it to look like, because the sculpture that you're entering through to get into the story world was actually a code that we have in our collection. And also giving him a color palette. That is also very important. I wanted to make sure that we get it right. And for him, on the other hand side, he took me on the journey with the small steps. So it wasn't that he created a lot and then he showed it to me and I was faced with the final outcome. It was really talking me step by step and saying, let's have weekly checks in, let's check in every 2 months. The project lead time was very, very intense. We only had in total, I think, a month to do that, which is insane, especially when you think about the VR part of it. I don't know how Vlad did it. I don't know how VR Human, how he managed to finish everything on time. Really incredible job from his side, because it was really intense, like a day and night involvement, but communicating and really understanding what the aesthetics are from both sides and what the possibilities and opportunities are was definitely key. And then it was really exciting because the whole thing was launched at the Museum of Other Realities, and it was again launched in the metaverse, in the virtual world, and it was super cool to be able to walk through these spaces with people and visitors and showing them the world. And you kind of had to explain less, I feel, because it already felt like they are in my mind, right? Like I took them and they actually didn't enter the virtual world, they entered my head. That's how it felt, because it's just like how accurate the work was that VR Human created. I think
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. There's actually a follow-up question. I mean, we actually have some people in the room who have headsets who often go to like VR chat and can access the metaverse. So is there any way that we could access this particular world that you created together and we can actually go, and I guess because it was commissioned by the Fabric of Reality. Yeah. So I don't know. Is there any way that we could get access to that?
So it used to be for a year, the exhibition was at the Museum of Other Realities. If you have access to it, please go to that museum because there are still amazing projects out there in that, even if it's not that particular one that I spoke about. But as I said, these are lots of case studies, right? So we are trying to open the future for more opportunities and possibilities. If you have access to visit these worlds, definitely do, because it just also opens your creative thinking because it adds another layer, right? Because quite often when we design, we think three-dimensional, but for our real world. But this will also extend it further beyond that. So if you have an access, go to that Museum of Other Realities for sure and have a look. Unfortunately, this particular exhibition is not on anymore. The Fabric of Reality isn't. But I also recommend for anyone into these projects, the Fashion Innovation Agency on their website, they have all of the projects that they have done in the past years, and they're incredible projects. And at least you can see the videos and the behind the scenes and the photographs of all of that, which is fantastic. So it's the Fashion Innovation Agency, which is part of London College of Fashion. And again, I'm really sorry if it's being blocked in terms of on the location, depending on where you are, but you can use this things where you fake the location where you are.
The VPNs,
yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you, I mean, it sounds like it was such a great collaboration. What was the biggest challenge for you in kind of translating your work into an immersive space? I mean, what was the biggest thing that you learned and that you can share, I guess, beyond communicating and really like underscoring what it is you want it to look like, to feel like, what color palettes, but is there anything else that you could say is something key to keep in mind, or something that you kind of overcame, a challenge that you overcame yourself?
No, of course. Even though I'm very, tech interested person, I love tech in my private life as well. And for me, it was obviously kind of no-brainer that I want to be part of it. I still felt like I struggled a bit being a trained designer and being used to physically touch materials and look at colors, like, swatch samples and fabrics and all of that. It was very challenging for me to look at it through a lens only, and having that only virtually. I definitely had to kind of like unlearn certain things in my brain and then learn again to be able to understand how that functions. This was definitely kind of a barrier I didn't even know existed. But for me, it took me a while to adapt to that and to understand that my expectations have to be very different. It's not about lower or higher expectations. It's just about it's a very different world, and it's a very different skill set, and it's very different tools we're using. So it's not like usually I would use scissors and feel the fabric and sewing and all of that. Creating things virtually is a very different approach. So for me, I guess it took me just a week to adapt to that. But once my head managed to wrap the whole thought around that, it actually went on really quickly.
Sorry, Sabina. So there aren't any other questions from the floor, but I think before we go, you're able to articulate the story of your brand so well. But for you personally, when was it that you understood what you wanted to do in the world was ethical and sustainable fashion? What was that turning point for you?
That's a fantastic question. I think there's not only one turning point. I think we all have a couple of turning points throughout the whole life. And even, I wouldn't exclude the opportunity of maybe a couple of years down the line, I'm thinking, oh, it doesn't make sense at all, because also the environment around us keeps changing, and the demand and the need and the urges keep changing as well. So for me, there were a couple of turning points. So wanting to work in fashion was one that I had as a child. Then later on, when I studied fashion design, understanding the lack of focus on the makers and behind the scenes, and the supply chain was a second one. Then actually starting my own brand was a third one, understanding how little I know about the industry, even though I've been working in it for so long and I've studied fashion design. And then about 3 years ago, I would say it finally clicked. It was like the fourth turning point, but definitely not the last one in my life. Hopefully not the last one, because turning points are usually a good thing. It was for me understanding that having just the product itself is not enough. And even with the product, there's still so many untapped opportunities that we are not doing and we're not using as an industry. But even that is not enough. I felt like with all the experience that I have and the whole journey, I need to share it with people. I need to make sure that the whole educational approach and the knowledge aspect becomes more present in my everyday work and everyday life. And that started to make more sense. So for me, that's why sometimes people say, oh, how can you wear so many different hats and do so many different things? But it's not different. It's kind of like the same thing. So I'm telling people about the theoretical stuff that we read in books and articles, but how I approach them in a practical approach with my own company. But then also I tell them about the failures that happened along the way, so the next generation of entrepreneurs doesn't have to do them again.
Great. Okay. So thank you. I mean, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate this. It was great to meet you in this way.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. And, you know, for everyone who is still in the room and wants to get in touch and has additional questions, you have my contact. Please feel free to message me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.